program, mega worldwide.
I've had people walk out on me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at housesparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn puss-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back. Happy to say that joining me and Johnny Million right now is Philip Ittner, our favorite Ukrainian transplant right now, who's live from Lviv, and which is always fun to say just for the number of L's and V's that are in there. Living the life in Lviv, living Lviv Aloka. We'll figure it out. But I'm sorry.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
Look, if I can make a joke
that not been done.
Wait, if I can make a joke that makes Johnny Million shake his head, that's a win for the day. For the record. So let's get started with how are you doing personally? Philip,
I'm okay. War is not fun. War is taxing for everybody. And I have the reason I'm back in Lviv from being in Kiev is because I had submitted my passport to the basically the migration control service, and I had to come back here to collect it, and they've given me another 90 days to be in Ukraine. And whenever you make a decision like that, you reassess why it is you're doing what you're doing, and why am I here when I could be, I could be in San Francisco, I could be, chilling in Michigan on my family's cottage on the lake. And so you reassess why it is you're doing what you're doing and why you're putting yourself through this. Seeing kids that are orphaned and seeing soldiers walking the streets with obvious war wounds and families disrupted and lives just interrupted and everything that the Russians are inflicting on this country that I care about so deeply, and I wonder why I do it.
Right.
And I look, I'm not going to say I do it without any reservations or without any second guessing.
Right.
But I have to be here. I really strongly feel I have to be here, and this is important for me to be here because I know this country as well as I do, and I see things coming out in the media that guys that parachute into this country that don't understand this country a fraction of what I do, and that's not hubris. That's me coming here for 21 years. So I feel a sense of obligation to be here, but I'm not going to lie, it's taxing. It's really, really taxing.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you checking in with us and sort of reliving and litigating the moments that you've had and what's going on there, because that in and of itself is work. And so I appreciate it a lot. I
appreciate you, and I appreciate your audience, and I even appreciate Johnny Million.
Yeah. See that? Even still.
Just poking fun.
Yeah. So, obviously, there's a lot going on with the Jan 6 thing. I'm sure there's, the Russian 60 Minutes crew are loving the redress. Look how messy democracy is. Blah blah blah. Now there is obviously a problem with democracy makes a mess and cleans it up, which is unlike what the Russians are planning to do. And there's been a lot of I found it hard to keep track of even this week the number of like incendiary lunatic statements made by Putin himself, or allegedly made by Putin himself, because I want to talk to you a little bit about your So first of all, do we even know where this dude is right now?
I mean, I don't know.
Right.
He didn't show up. So one of there are a couple of things he does annually,
right,
that are kind of big public displays. That he does a round table with the foreign press. He does a kind of he of course does May 9th.
Yeah.
And then one of the other things he does is he does a Ask Me Anything from the people of Russia kind of thing.
Yeah, like he's got a movie coming out or something, or a new series season.
I mean, it harkens back. Oddly, it really is a Russian thing. It harkens back to the Czar, where people used to write to the Czar because there's a thing in Russia called
That's
"If
fascinating.
the Czar only knew." It's an idiom in Russia. If the Czar only knew, because
Right.
the idea is that the leadership is that they're good. The people who are in charge are good. It's just all these corrupt intermediaries
Right.
screw things up. So there was a tradition in Tsarist Russia where people would write to the Tsar and say, "Hey, our local guy is bad. Please help us," sort of thing.
Right.
So this is the inheritance of that tradition, and he does it every year. But this year he didn't do it, and that's got a lot of people saying, "What's up?" And we do know that we do. I mean, at this point, it's pretty much verified that he has some form of cancer, and he's taking some treatment for cancer. So there's obviously a concern about his health. But I mean, the statements. There was the one thing that we saw, and yes, it was most likely taped. But the statement that he was in an interview and he talked about how he likened himself to Peter the Great.
Yeah. Which brings by the way, I want to say that you just telling us that bit about if the Czar only knew and all that kind of stuff. I mean, this is like an intellectual pincer move moment where you're like, oh, this dude's been doing this thing, and you, from our point of view, it's like what a lovely thing if a Democratic leader would just do that and have a kind of AMA with the people and blah blah blah, not as a candidate but as the leader himself and yada yada yada. And yet ultimately, it's just him play acting as the Czar, like in many ways, like Xi Jinping wearing the Mao suit again. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's very performative. It harkens back to Tsarist Russia, not Soviet Russia. Putin has gone out of his way to return, and again, okay, this also plays into the Peter the Great statement. He has always harkened back to Russia's greatness on the global stage, not during the Soviet era, but during the imperialist Russian era.
Right.
And I would argue that Soviet Russia was only just an expansion of Tsarist imperialist Russia. But I do know lots of academics and people who are Russia observers who would argue with me about that.
Right.
But regardless, I think he has always harkened back to being a czar more than he harkened back to being the head of the Politburo. So his statement about being Peter the Great was incredibly disturbing.
Right.
Because what he said was that Peter the Great took territory that we claimed it was ours. And once we took it, the Europeans just had to accept that it was. And it gets into a really complex mentality within Russia, because Russia always says it's a long-standing thing. We have never fought a war of aggression. We have only fought for what is ours.
Right.
And then kind of
like China and Vietnam in 1979.
Exactly.
78.
And then once we've obtained our objective, we absorb what it is we're going for and just say, well, that was a protective thing. That was defensive at the end of the day.
Right.
And I can jump in with a question from chat right now. The Dragon Ice Flyer is asking who would take over if Putin died right now.
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
No one. There's no one. There's nobody there who, and that's by design. There are there are a couple of minor apparatchiks who might be in a position.
Does Medvedev just move back in because they need somebody who kind of knows? I mean,
no. Medvedev is
on the outs.
Really he's on the outs. He's Mike Pence.
Yeah. That guy who took the guy they gave power to, the guy that he gave power to supposedly when he went under the knife, who's part of the Security Council, which bypassed the sort of upper structure of the government anyways. That sounds like somebody who either is sufficiently loyal to him or somebody who will, he's genuinely afraid of, has the ability to do him in, that assassination attempt he dodged or something may have been initially caused by that guy, so he's got to trust him or something. I don't know. Like, that guy seems to be, it's weird that he gave him power while he was under, and maybe that automatically pushes him to the top of the Pez dispenser.
Yeah, well, look, there's
Mm-hmm.
maybe Tucker Carlson. The problem with the problem. Okay, so this is a really complex question.
Yeah.
That we could talk about this for a very long time, and I'm going to try and consolidate it. Putin's power base comes from two sources: the oligarchs and what are called the siloviki, the
Right.
strongmen, and that's the intelligence, the army, those kind of guys, the guys who are able to kill people, and they like to be in the shadows. And I don't see any one of them following in his footsteps. And the oligarchs are more about making money than they are about power. So they're not really well suited to take over the reins of things.
Mm-hmm.
But he's structured Russia purposefully this way because for him to create an heir apparent would create somebody who could challenge his authority.
Mm-hmm.
So he's caught in
It's
that.
terrible.
I had a conversation with, of all people, Geraldo Rivera about 5 years ago during the Bataclan attacks. I was working for Fox, and Geraldo came over for the Bataclan. And I had a conversation with Geraldo, and I said, I think Putin's in trouble. I think he's caught between a rock and a hard place. And Geraldo was like, no. Everybody I know that talks about Russia says he's fine. I said, no, he is fine. But there's going to come a time when he's going to have to start moving to retirement or leaving the center stage. And when that happens, it's going to get really dangerous for him because he can't have somebody around who is waiting to assume power, because the second that some person exists, the second somebody like that exists, they become a threat to his ultimate.
Yeah, we have to take a break. But every time they talk about the power shift in Russia, all I can think of is trial by stone, and from the Dark Crystal, like that. Just these skeevy, greedy, grotesque vultures all fighting for a chip of something. And that's honestly how it's playing out. And the funny thing is that if somebody plays nice to try and gets Navalny out of jail to try and balance things with the rest of the world, it's very possible that without Putin's pushdown structure, Navalny would have a genuine shot at sort of over a period of time, maybe a year or so, having an election and running the place, which would be a global shift in reality. We got to take a break. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Did you know, the great thing about watching the live stream on infotainmentwars.com or twitch.tv/Hal Sparks is the between the lines, the behind the scenes conversations. And we were just talking about what a mess Russia finds itself in. And I heard a wonderful, I'm always fascinated. We've had the demographics conversation that, Russia and China are both fighting a massive demographics collapse. And there were two new, I always shy away from whenever you have a percentage without the base number, because that doesn't tell me anything, And in Russia's case, there's been a lot of talk about their demographics going in the wrong direction for a while now. It's been an issue. It's been something they have to deal with. Russia, deaths in Russia have outpaced births this year so far by 700,000. Normally, when they were in danger, they've known it's been a problem, and they were getting about sort of correcting it. They were going to pay women, to have kids. They were going to give an incentive, maternity incentives and all this stuff. And even with those programs, deaths were outpacing births by 300,000 for the last 3 or 4 years. About 331, and including whether or not their COVID numbers are true, which is a whole other conversation. They've lost 700,000 people since January. that is and pegged on deaths. That's terrifying as a country. And it's bizarre. And and again, their life expectancy, unless you're in the actual Duma as a male, Russian, your life expectancy is like 58 years old.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Yeah, they've got a problem with mortality rates and birth rates. The birth rates being so low, the mortality being so. The age of mortality being so low.
Right.
But they also have a massive brain drain problem, especially exacerbated by this war.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Russians are leaving because they don't like what's happening with the war.
Right.
They don't like what's happening in the Kremlin. They're at a crisis point. They're absolutely at a 100% a crisis point.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been watching all this stuff in Western media talking about how great and powerful, and we have to respect this enormous country and how powerful this country is. Well, nobody wants to disrespect Russia. Russia's
Russians.
an amazing, or Russia as a culture, as a country. It is a historic.
Depends on which one we're talking about, but yes, understood.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we also have to recognize that there's a major problem internally within Russia.
Right.
And it's not only about the population, it's also about their structure, it's also about their resources, it's also about their development or the lack thereof.
They've given up on innovation entirely. And it's interesting. China at least has the illusion of innovation because they borrow technology from us, from the South Koreans, from whoever they can kind of lift it from, and then try to carry it forward. They're killing their innovation in the schools. It's sort of accidental. The Russians just gave up on it entirely. That they literally, the irony that the right wing sees Russia as strong and Putin as a strong leader and all that, and uses Venezuela as an example of how everything can possibly go wrong for a country. When Russia is on a bullet train to Venezuelan-like numbers, where they are effectively a commodity-based, specifically oil and gas country, with no other significant exports.
When's the last time you were in the market for a Russian refrigerator?
Yeah, exactly. Or a washing machine. They're stealing washing machines from Ukraine that people have gotten from Europe and from Ukraine itself.
The only thing they do is rip stuff out of the ground. Now, I've argued in the past with, again, many of my other Russia watchers, that there could be a boom if indeed global warming results in the Arctic opening up, and they are able to open up what's called the Northeast Passage.
Right.
Because everything is based because of
so all the goods they don't make, they can ship them. They literally they become basically the Malaysian shipyard of Chinese goods.
And the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal become obsolete, and they take a dime after off everything that is shipped east, west, whatever direction.
Yeah, they should look at the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative map that circumvents them and goes exactly through that area without their permission, that they allegedly already signed a deal with China about. Boy, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a mess. It's a mess. But I mean, look, if the Arctic was open up, 12 months out of the year, and there's a reason why they're spending billions of dollars. The Russians have instituted a multi-billion-dollar plan to develop a whole fleet. I think they're building 10 of these things. Arctic nuclear icebreakers, nuclear power plant powered icebreakers to break through the ice so that they can keep that route over the Arctic, over their northern border.
Yeah, and you wonder why they're not a good partner in fighting global warming.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
No, I know. It's crazy.
It's
crazy.
And the Chinese have partnered with them to get goods out through that way because they don't want to put them through the South China Seas because America has a relationship with Australia, with India, with Malaysia, with Vietnam, with Tonga, with all the islands in the South China Seas, with Taiwan itself, with South Korea. Like, the Chinese would like to circumvent that entirely by going around the Russian tip and coming up and going over the top. And the deal they'll strike won't pay Russia anything. It'll just be a trade-off, which involves, I guess, putting a commercial rail line from Beijing straight through Moscow, which would be insanity. I don't understand.
I don't know how that would ever work.
I don't either, but they're planning it. They're pretending to work towards it.
But if the Northeast Passage does actually open up, it gives Russia a stranglehold on global trade, and that would be enormously profitable.
Well, the cheap side of it, yes, they can cheaply sell passage, unlike other places which would have to, narrow that. It would lower the cost of what it costs to go through the Suez, what it would cost to go through the Panama Canal. We didn't dig the Panama Canal because we were going to charge a toll. We did it because we wanted to circumvent South America and not have to go around. Right. And Europe, quite frankly, didn't want to go around. It had more to do with European trade with Southeast Asia than it did with the U.S. But in the digging of that, it wasn't so we could set up a toll booth. It exists as part of that to pay it off, but that was paid off a long time ago in many ways. So
no, this would be a profit margin for the Russians. That's how they would look at it. I believe, I strongly believe. It would also give them a stranglehold, and they always have pursued global power. So all of that comes into play. But look, getting back to the original point of Russia being in a state of crisis, because until the Northeast Passage does actually open up, and that's a big if, they're in crisis.
Yes.
They're absolutely 100% in crisis. They have a population problem. They have a power structure problem. They have a problem in the fact that once their society opened up to the world in a global community, and with the information age where Russians can see people living much happier lives, and they keep telling their people, you can't have that because you're...
Well, there's no way. There's no way the Northwest Passage opens like miraculously in time to salvage Putin's situation, or even the person who's after him. This is I'm talking 2050. Yeah, right. It's silly. So even planning on that when you can't, it's kind of like what the Red Skull says in Captain America First Avenger, where he's like, Hitler speaks of 1,000-year Reich, and yet his troops are dying of starvation on the battlefield. And there's an element of that absurdity in this, that you're looking for a 50-year solution to a 2-week problem. And by the way, the United States is inverting that. We are moving production home. We are creating demand destruction around oil and gas. By the time Russia gets around to shipping stuff over the Arctic Passage, if that ever comes, we're not going to need it anymore or want it anymore. And neither is Canada, and neither is South America. Neither is
Europe.
Yes.
Right? And
even then, that's a circular route to, where that's better overland or through the Black Sea. It's a bizarre... Anyways, we got to take a break. We're at a hard break on this half hour, and I want to remind everybody to follow Philip Ittner on Twitter. 1 L in Philip, 2 T's in Ittner. And then you'll see
questions from the chat.
You'll see his vlog. We'll come back with questions from the chat after this with Johnny Million. He's been aggregating them madly in the background. We'll be back.
Good man.
Mm-hmm. Welcome back, everybody. We've got some questions from our chat room at twitch.tv/Hal Sparks that Johnny Million's going to have for Philip live in Lviv, Ukraine. What do you got, Johnny?
I got from Amanda's Miracle Chipmunk Milk.
Sure. So her maiden name. That's good. All right.
Yeah, she kept her maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
Can we hear Phil's commentary about the British soldiers Russia executed?
They haven't executed them yet.
I don't think they've executed them yet.
Yeah.
It's and it's not Russia. It's okay. So there are two British citizens and a Moroccan, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
They are being held by the Lugansk People's Republic, which are really just surrogates for Russia.
Right.
So I mean, when I say it's not Russia, we're splitting hairs.
Right.
It's disgusting. It is a crime. though they were not mercenaries. That's the argument that the Lugansk People's Republic are saying, is that they were illegal mercenaries fighting in Ukraine. That is not the case. They took a contract with the Ukrainians. They were fighting. Okay, so all right. Again, we might be splitting hairs if I try and see things from the other side, but they were not strictly speaking mercenaries. They were foreign fighters in fighting on behalf of Ukraine.
Right.
They signed up. They had a contract. And so look, if they end up doing this, if they end up killing them, it will be a crime. And the shocking thing, Amanda, about that is that I have seen watching the First Channel in Russia, where they had a drag out fight about how these guys should be killed.
Yeah, hanging, drawing and quartering was mentioned.
Should we shoot them or should we draw and quarter them? That's the mentality, and I think it says a lot. Or alternatively, should we say we'll give them back to you, Britain, if you release the money that you have seized from the oligarchs, which shows you the cynicism of Russian society. Not all Russians, obviously, but Russian public opinion and what's being foisted on the Russian people. It's tragic. There's just no two ways around it. Those I feel for those families. I feel for those kids. They're in essence, they are assassinating them. They're killing them. If they follow through with it, it would be it'd be a crime. It'd be a crime.
Yeah, technically speaking, it would be a war crime. But also, the argument that they were having is that criminals are hung, soldiers are shot. And the problem with shooting them with it, because they were going to kill them by firing squad, was that somehow recognizes them as soldiers and therefore gives them credibility. And so we should hang them, and they go, too bad it's not the 14th century or we draw and quarter them and blah, blah. And they just, yapping about this. More than likely, what'll happen is there'll be some sort of direct prisoner exchange. It'll be 1-to-1 for people in this case, because the Russians aren't in this situation to make these kind of demands, and hanging on to these people is more valuable because at some point you're going to need some negotiations. That's why they've been taking hostages all through Ukraine. That's it. And the U.S. There was one of the other thing. Well, let's get to another question, because me, I will just eat up all your time. So Johnny, I know we have other questions. So get there.
Yeah. Let's see. Ed's 3D Tech is asking, can you ask Philip, is Russia run like a mob state?
Yes. Yes,
next question.
100%. I could say a lot about that, but at the end of the day, yes. Russia has a thing. There's a system called a krisha, which is a krisha in Russian is roof. So everybody has a krisha. Everybody has a roof on top of. And ultimately, it's feudalism. It's a mob mentality. So and yes, it's a mob state.
Connie Kelly is wondering, what is the chance that a woman could ever take over in Russia?
I'm sorry, Kathy was asking that?
Connie Kelly.
Oh, Connie Kelly, yeah.
Connie. Okay, Connie, could a woman take over? No, I don't think so. And it's way more complex, as everything is with Russia, than just simply saying yes or no. The reason why I don't think women run Russia, let's make no mistake about it. Women are the ones who make things happen in Russia. They rear the children. They try to keep their men from drinking themselves into an early grave.
Squad goals.
Women are the power structure within Russia. However, it's like, you know what? It's kind of like a lion's pride, where the male lion sits around getting fat in the shade, and then when he has to go take down an antelope, he goes and takes down the antelope, and that makes him the king of the pride, right? That makes him. But really, it's the women who make the place run. But ultimately, because the alpha, the male lion takes down the antelope, he gets your question, Carol. It, it, a woman can't be in control in Russia because that would put her center stage. And a woman's place in Russia, because it is still a very much a male-dominated society, that her place is to keep things running behind the scenes, and it's still a man's world in Russia, very much so. I mean, they have a law. They actually have a law in Russia where it is legal for a man to beat his wife.
Yeah, right. Well, there you go. So the airport's open, I guess.
That's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back to the show. Sorry we had a audio kerfuffle there or whatever. I'm going to always chalk those up to DDoS attacks by Macedonian hackers paid for directly by from Vladimir Putin's slush fund in Cyprus that used to be run by Wilbur Ross. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. On the line with us, of course, from Lviv in Ukraine is our dear friend Philip Ittner, and he was answering a question, well, in many ways, several from our chat room, and Johnny Million has another one for him. What do we have, Johnny Million?
Yeah, Cosmic Rose wants to know if Phil saw any of the January 6th hearing yet.
I did. I keep a very close eye on. I mean, I'm an American. You know, I didn't watch it as much as I watched more analysis of it than anything else. You know, you would never see that in so many parts of the world, and so we should count our lucky stars that we live in a democracy. For now, at least.
For now.
Right. Well, it's it's great if you can keep it, right? And that's by the way why we vote every election. We vote for real. If you ever are deluded enough to think you're choosing between the lesser of two evils, you always choose less evil. You make an active choice to choose less evil, because letting the scales tip towards evil over time is precisely what puts you in the situation we found ourselves in, and we find ourselves in with people like Putin in the world, and in many ways Xi Jinping as well. Because
and that's why there are young Ukrainian men on the front lines right now dying, literally dying.
Yeah.
For the right to self-determine. And we should not forget that.
The and chat room, I just want to check in on audio across the board from you, because I'm hearing different things from different networks, from YouTube versus Twitch versus Facebook versus Twitter. Check in, let me know if it's okay. It's a little rough in some ways, just because we're Philip's in Ukraine.
I'll go
so
get my mic.
Yeah, that's right. We might do that. We had 3 minutes. We got a break, and we'll at that point, I think we'll switch over to that to maybe see if it helps. But until then, we'll stick with the fact that you're low to them, but you're loud to me. So I'm not quite sure where that freak out is in the software. It's very curious. And it's there's going to be issues just because of life. Reality-based stuff is and again,
well, considering we're doing this on a shoestring.
Yes.
And I used to work for a television network that would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do what we're doing right now for nothing. Yeah, that's right. So,
it's pretty amazing. Again, technology is always deflationary, kids, and always will be, and as are fuel costs. So we harken back to the 2014 oil crater that we're headed towards, because both Venezuela and Iran, with all the hemming and hawing, are eventually going to enter into the market with another 3 million barrels a day, which is going to be 2 million barrels over the point we were at in 2018. And then where was prices headed then? It was on their way down. And what happened in 2020? They ended up cratering. Can we again, that doomed to repeat history thing? Maybe we never left history. Maybe, just maybe, we're still in it. And these pauses, like in many ways, when you eat a meal in a place like where Philip is right now, the war doesn't stop just because you're feeding yourself and you have a moment. When people watched movies or listened to a string quartet in a bombed out building during the push and all those kind of things, those were moments where the war ended in those moments, but it still was continuing. On a geopolitical scale, a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to Russia, has been going on this whole time. It never stopped. The intention was that to never let it ebb and ever, and that's crucial. So, and this is me. You know what? Let's take an early break if we could. I know we had to take one because of the break, but let's take an early break so we can see if we can fix Phil's mic so he sounds a little clearer, if that helps at all. We'll have the last section of the happy ending, at least with that, and it'll give you time to enjoy the song. Yeah, so we'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega, worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
So from Duber on Twitch, will Russia ever be able to stop the pollution coming from Russia? Can Navalny help fix something like that?
Well, not from jail. But no. Oh boy. Okay. Russia's problem, as we've discussed today, is that they have one way of making money, and that is to rip stuff out of the ground. And in order to do that, they create pollution. They do not care. They also have a different perspective on man's relationship with nature. Mm-hmm. It's not. Boy, this really opens up a whole can of worms. It's not that it's adversarial.
Yeah, I got it. Sorry? I fixed it. No, we're good.
Russia's perspective on nature is they are very much in concert but adversarial. Mm-hmm. It's really nuanced and complex, but they are not worried about, and also there's fatalism involved in the sense that they don't care what happens tomorrow as long as today they can eke out an existence. So they don't look at generally. Really broad strokes. They generally don't look at conservation the way that we do. That is, there are changes happening in Russia. There are those who are very much concerned about conservationism, but the overwhelming attitude towards nature is that it is an adversarial relationship. Right. Although we are part of nature, we must dominate nature, and it's part of the whole power structure, the whole perception of power. So, they don't. No, I don't see them doing anything unless there's a major cultural change within Russia about the damage that they're doing to the ecological system.
Yeah, they're not going to change that anytime soon. There was basically the relationship with dragons culturally is often representative of how people feel about nature. And there was a whole big thing about the Russians and the Chinese had a very distinct culturally, a long time ago, distinct difference about how dragons were treated. The Chinese viewed dragons as in the earth and therefore don't wake up the sleeping dragon. Try to treat the earth and your presence here as kind of, you fit in so you don't wake up the dragon and he wrecks everything, because they mean well and they're good things and they're what keeps the weather moving the way it's supposed to, and they're good, benevolent monsters in some ways, but they're good and benevolent. The Russians always viewed them as something that had to be slaughtered. That that they take
subdued.
That you subdue it.
Somebody wins, somebody loses.
Yes, they take your woman, they take your gold. Blah blah blah. The interesting thing is, post-Soviet, the Chinese adopted a more Russian view of dragons. So, soft culture wise on on holidays and stuff, they still view them with dragon dances and the like. The way they used to, but their environmental reaction to what that analogy means is now much closer to what the Russians do. That's where the breed, and that's a Soviet era thing. Kill your culture.
And we've talked about this in the past. I mean, Russia's I think there's so much about Russia and America that we have more in common with one another than we do in many ways with Europeans. And there's a divergence point between the cultures in that we forged into nature, and because of that we have a kind of an optimistic outlook on man's relationship with nature, and just in our relationship with power and how we live our lives. Whereas Russia fought its way out of nature, and the first thing they do is build a fortress and a Kremlin, a Kreml. And they always are aware that the wolf is at the door. They are deathly afraid of nature. Every fairy tale, every story they have about nature is that nature's going to come and kill you.
Right. There's also I would also say there's also a parallel, or a divergence in that parallel, I would say, between how Russians view we make a distinction in the West between nature as containing trees, which are good, and smallpox, which is bad. Russia looks at both trees and smallpox equally. Trees are in the way of our progress, and smallpox can be used as a weapon to get rid of the people who are in the way of our other progress. All of it is commodified, and that's one of the reasons why I think they got along, Putin and Trump allegedly got along so well, because, again, they have a transactional relationship with nature, and nature owes them money.
Power. The idea of what power is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whereas in the West because we have a mixed culture, we have a mixed understanding of those kind of things, and we think in general, more trees good, because we've recognized that we get this free benefit from the existence of these things. We don't have to force that. It's part of what's naturally there, which is much more akin to sort of an Eastern view, Eastern in terms of Asian. Which I always think it's funny to call like Russia the East in some ways, since they're so, right wing in many ways and conservative in their viewpoint. It always seems very like hyper West in some ways. It's not a
lot of Taoism in Russia.
Exactly right. So we got a few more minutes left. Let's get a couple more questions in.
Johnny?
Yeah, everybody's wondering, how is Malcolm Nance?
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm's fine. Malcolm is doing what Malcolm does. I will not go into detail about what Malcolm is up to. I had dinner with him recently.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing good. He's he's doing what he is meant to be doing. Malcolm is a warrior. He's gonna fight a war. He is fighting a war.
Right.
So, but he is safe. He is well.
He's in his element.
That's about all I'm going to say, because I don't want to put him at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And have you talked with the World Kitchen while you're out there?
The World Kitchen? No, I haven't, but I intend to.
Mm-hmm.
I want to reach out to them. They're doing, amazing work. Bless their hearts. I have spoken to a lot of people who are doing humanitarian help here. Irwin Redliner, for example, and I are working on a couple of things. I'm trying to help him in his efforts to help the children of this country. There are lots of people doing a lot of really, really good things in this country and trying to help as best they can. And, if I can help, I will.
Right.
In any way that I can. So,
That's
but
great.
I haven't spoken. I want to, though.
Okay,
That's all the questions I've got at the moment.
Oh, right on. Cool. Because I have a couple. The main one being is the howitzers and the HIMARS are starting to arrive, if not have already. Germany just while they and France have both been playing carrot with Putin allegedly on phone calls, are also playing stick, because the French just sent it's like 18 or 20 howitzers. Half of them are on trucks that can be moved super quick. And the Germans, and this is new, just sent 7 howitzers themselves. That's an enormous amount of artillery for the space that we're talking about, even still. I mean, they still need more, I would argue, because they don't all last very long, and, they've got a limited lifespan, especially when they're being used regularly.
And when they're being attacked.
Yeah, exactly. When they get destroyed, which is,
they're going to be destroyed. They're going to be in combat.
That's right.
The Germans and the Europeans, the major European powers have promised a lot, but they haven't delivered. That's starting to change. We are actually starting to see these systems physically show up. I mean, I saw a thing earlier today about Ukrainians being really critical of Scholz in Germany, about him promising the world but not really actually ever delivering. Well, that's starting to change,
right?
And it's interesting to see what's happening out in the East, because the Russians are throwing. I mean, if they're not throwing everything that they have at that pocket around Severodonetsk, then what are they doing, and why aren't they throwing more at it? And the summation is that maybe they can't, and that may be an indication that they are getting close to being a spent force.
That's right.
And,
Okay.
So we'll have to see look, we're in a very precarious moment in this war.
That's right.
But
And it needs to go forward. We're running out of time. Greatly appreciate it. That's it. We're squealed in there. Thank you, Chicago. This is the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. We'll see you guys next Saturday. We're here every week. Thanks so much. Take care of yourself and take care of somebody else. And we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Hold on, chat room. We'll